Hello and welcome to my channel. So I come to you with some exciting news regarding Final Fantasy VII Remake. As of the making of this video, there were some exciting announcements during the PlayStation State of Play on Thursday, February 25th, 2021, where they shared news involving PS4 and the PS5, and they saved the best for last and announced that indeed Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1 is coming to the PlayStation 5 on June 10th, 2021. And this will be called Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. And so we got a lot of exciting news, and I just wanted to kind of summarize what we know so far. So as far as this PS5 version, first of all, if you happen to already own a PS4 copy, then you will be able to go ahead and benefit from a free upgrade to the PS5 version with a few caveats. But what is involved with the PS5 version? Well, there are going to be graphical updates, including textures, fog effects, lighting, quality of life improvements, which are going to include a graphics optimization mode that prioritizes 4K resolution, a performance optimization mode that prioritizes 60 FPS frame rate. They're also going to add a normal classic difficulty mode. So in addition to the regular easy, the regular normal mode, and also the easy classic, now there will be a normal classic mode. They are also reporting faster loading times, a photo mode that allows you to take snapshots, and in addition to all of that, there will be DLC, and this will feature none other than Miss Yuffie. So we mentioned a little earlier that if you already own a PS4 copy of Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1, you can upgrade to the PS5 version for free. However, there would be an additional fee for the DLC. So the DLC itself is not free. So we have some information on pricing. If you're going to start fresh and get the PlayStation 5 version, that would come to $69.99 US dollars. That would include the DLC, and there will also be a digital deluxe version available for $89.99 US dollars, and that would include a digital art book and a digital mini soundtrack. If you pre-order either of these versions, you will also get a Kakstar weapon for Yuffie. Going back to this Yuffie DLC, so on the Final Fantasy Twitter page, they say, play as the ninja Yuffie Kisaragi and infiltrate the Shinra Corporation to steal a powerful materia. So we do have Yuffie, who describes herself as an elite special forces operative for the new Wutai government. And apparently she comes to Midgar looking for materia, but ends up working with the sort of alternate Avalanche team. So not Barrett and Tifa and Biggs, etc., but that alternate group. So we have Yuffie, and we're introduced to a character known as Sonen Kusakubai, if I have that correct. And then we also see a woman with short black hair, glasses. We also see a blonde dude. Don't really know what his role may be, but he shows up a few times there. And we even get a little view of Tifa, Barrett, and Biggs actually discussing Cloud's disappearance from the Sector 5 Mako reactor, when we know that he ends up falling into Aerith's church. So apparently at that time, Yuffie and co spot Tifa, Barrett, and Biggs, but decide not to approach them. So some people are speculating that maybe we'll get to dig into a little of what Tifa was up to during this time. My impression, just going from the trailer, was that we probably won't see a lot of what's going on with them. That may be just about all we get to see. It looks to me like the focus is going to be on Yuffie. But anyway, we do get some footage from the DLC, and we get to see a little bit of how Yuffie interacts with the environment. We see some wall running, some jumping, some long distance breaking of boxes. We get a little look at Sonan's weapon, Yuffie's weapon. We see them in action and in battle, and we see that there's some sort of team combo involved. So apparently Sonan himself is not playable, but you will be able to kind of give him commands. Another interesting random thing that we see here is that he does refer to her as boss or senpai. And we also see references to Deep Ground. We see some Deep Ground enemies referencing the Dirge of Cerberus compilation game. So we have that. Very exciting. So that is what we were able to see as part of the PlayStation State of Play. But there's more. There's more. Because afterward, Square posted on their Final Fantasy VII Remake Twitter some more news. First of all, there will be 2 mobile games coming out. One is called First Soldier, and the second is Ever Crisis. So these names may sound familiar because it was sort of leaked, so to speak, that Square Enix had registered these 2 names, and people had speculated that maybe First Soldier might be some sort of Sephiroth related DLC, and Ever Crisis might be related to Zack in some way. Turns out that First Soldier again is a mobile game expected to come out sometime this year in 2021, and it is actually a battle royale sort of game with some RPG elements. So on the Final Fantasy VII Twitter, we have this description. It's a battle royale game set in Midgar before the events of Final Fantasy VII. As a soldier candidate, make full use of your abilities in a battle for your survival. So this takes place again prior to the events of Final Fantasy VII. Doesn't appear to feature necessarily any of the characters that we're familiar with. But there you have it. And then we have the second mobile game, which is Ever Crisis, projected to come out sometime in 2022. Again, on the Final Fantasy VII Twitter, it's described as a chapter-structured single-player game covering the whole of the Final Fantasy VII timeline, including the events of the original game and the Final Fantasy VII compilation titles. So it is going to be released in episodes or chapters, new chapters every month. And it is going to cover, again, the timeline from even before the original game. Apparently, it's going to also include the First Soldier timeline, that mobile game, and go through Dirge of Cerberus. So as far as the visuals or the look on the field map, you have very cute chibi characters, but in battle, things do look much closer to what we had in Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1, so that's very interesting. Apparently, there may not be any voice acting, or if there is any, it will be minimal at best. This is described as a command-style RPG with an ATB, materia, summons, limit breaks, and apparently there will also be some information or a portion that deals with Sephiroth as a youth. And there will also be open beta testing at some point for these mobile games. So we got that information as well. And as if that weren't enough, we also got the news on Twitter that the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack is now available on online music subscription services, including Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon. So that is exciting as well. But that's not all. There also was a Famitsu interview with Nomura released, and Audrey over on Twitter actually translated the article, which was originally in Japanese. Some highlights from the article. We already mentioned some things such as information on the 2 mobile games, the fact that in Ever Crisis there will be a portion that covers Sephiroth in his youth, that sort of thing. But something interesting that came up is that for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1, Nomura was co-director with Hamaguchi. Nomura will now be the creative director of Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 and the mobile games, and Hamaguchi will now step into the role of director. Nomura says that it won't really have much of an effect on his role, but it is interesting to note. Despite what Nomura says, of course, it does make me curious if that will have any effect on the direction that things go in. Hopefully not in a bad way. But yeah, so we have several things there. So to summarize, we have the PS5 version that includes Yuffie DLC. We have 2 mobile games. We now have the Final Fantasy VII Remake soundtrack available on Spotify, etc. And it's exciting times, very exciting times. Now, one thing I'm curious about is, for example, this idea of a PC version. Will we be seeing Final Fantasy VII Remake ever coming out on PC? I still think we probably will, but of course, the state of play was focused on PlayStation, and technically, Final Fantasy VII Remake is still under that exclusivity agreement until about April 10th. So probably sometime after April 10th, I would expect that we might get some news regarding a PC version. But for now, no word. Another question, of course, is when do we think part 2 of the remake will come out? I have thought that maybe something like 2023 would be good, and if we're lucky, and I still think that that's probably pretty realistic. So we have some things coming out this year with the PS5 version of the Remake Intergrade. We also have the mobile game for Soldier coming out this year. Next year in 2022 is when they're going to begin releasing chapters of Ever Crisis, the second mobile game. So I would expect that 2023, sometime in 2023 at the earliest, if we're lucky, maybe we can start thinking about part 2 coming out. But I think that covers what I wanted to share with you. So a lot of exciting news. And I did want to mention, give credit where credit is due. I haven't always enjoyed Square Enix's decision making when it comes to marketing and promotion, but I think they did an excellent job here and they over-delivered. There were a lot of us hoping that they'd have some news for us for this state of play, and not only did they have news, but they had so much that it's almost overwhelming, but in the best of ways. So it's very exciting times, and kudos to them for giving a lot of us something very, very satisfying and exceeding our expectations. So with that, I think that's good for now, and later.